Folks, hello. This is Dr. Kaz, and I am bringing you a short video on how to gain academic success in not just my class, but any other classes that you may be taking. I do hope that you find this seminar helpful. We're going to be covering the topic of active versus passive learning, something that a lot of students just don't realize what they are doing when they are learning materials and courses. So this hopefully will help you to become a much more successful student and hopefully get you to your goals that much easier and that much more inclusive and better. Okay, so let's talk about passive and active learning. So I'm sure you've heard a time when you were in a situation where someone has been talking to you and they're telling you a story maybe or giving you instructions, and after whatever happens with that conversation or whenever they've been speaking to you, you've asked yourself, well, I have no idea what was just said to me. Well, there's a difference here between hearing and listening. Normally when we talk about hearing, that is passive, and so that's a situation in which your actual auditory organs for hearing are picking up information, but you're not paying attention to that information. You're not consciously taking in that information. So you could be told something and you can't really recall what was being said to you. That's hearing. Listening, that's the active form of taking in information. That's what we're trying to do. That's what I want my students in my classes to actually be a part of during class. I want them to be active in taking that information. So I actually want them to listen to me. So one of the questions someone has to ask themselves is, are you an active listener or are you a passive person that just is hearing things and not consciously taking in that information? And so we really want to get you to that point where you are an active listener or an active learner here. So in order to be successful in school, in this class, if you were taking one of my classes, is to be active. And that really means to actually act. You need to take control of the situation and listen to what is being taught and then actively, all right, try to learn that information here. So people that are active learners will actively seek out things to help them in the learning process. They actually do things. And so a lot of times in my courses, students will complain about a grade because usually the grades give them the feedback on how they're performing in the course. And so they'll ask me, how can I improve my grade? And a lot of times I'll send them an email, and I still do, or I'll sit down and talk to them about some strategies that they can use. But actually, what they really need to do is decide whether or not they are going to be in active learning. So I tell them, this is very important. You need to take control of your learning. A lot of folks, if they're going to college, might be paying for college with their own dime. And so you have to ask yourself, what am I spending my money on? Is it worth what I'm spending my money on? And so that's why I tell folks, take control of your learning. Be an active learner here. So what exactly is active learning, right? Simply saying it's doing something. You are going to be doing something that is going to help you learn the material. So here on the screen, you can see several examples of active learning. An easy one, come to class. Come to class. The best learning happens in class. I see it as the professor standing in front of the class. I love it. It is a joy of mine to actually be teaching a difficult concept and then seeing the light bulb switch on in people's heads when they're understanding that concept there. And so it's best done when you come to class. If you don't come to class, you might lose or miss that important learning there. Take notes, actively take notes. Now, I know this is not always an easy thing for some folks like myself. It was very difficult to pay attention to what was being said and to take notes at the same time. So depending on your professor, at the time when I was in school, we could audio record some of our classes, and that's exactly what I would do. And I would try to take some notes, but mainly I would audio record the class. Then after class, and this can be somewhat time consuming, but again, it was part of my active learning process, was to listen to those audio recorded notes and then write, or audio recorded lectures, and then write down my notes as I was listening to it after class. Read the assignments. I can't stress enough how important it is. Now, I know a lot of folks don't enjoy reading textbooks. I didn't when I was a student, but I will tell you what, right? Reading the assignments that are given to you in class is very important, and they're not there or they're not in that class just for busy work. We all live busy lives. I respect the time of my students. I hope they respect mine. And so the reading assignments that are given are going to help them learn and master that material. Speaking of the material, study the materials, study those notes, right? You have plenty of practice exercises that are given in your classes. Textbooks have plenty of those too. And so you want to study that material because primarily that's what you'll be tested on. But a lot of my students are taking my classes to move on to their actual professional program that they're going to enter into. And the material that I'm teaching is a crucial foundation for what they will be learning. Listening in class, yes, important to attend class, but while you're in class, you want to make the most of your time and listen in class. Pay attention. That is going to be crucial. And finally, we have learning from mistakes. Right? A lot of times when you have assignments or tests, right, people get a grade on those assignments and tests, and some folks take it at that and just say, oh, okay, I got an 86 on this test, or I got a 79 on this assignment. I'll just have to work harder. But most active learners will go and ask to see those tests, to see those assignments, to see what they got wrong so they can learn from their mistakes. You would be surprised how many times I've had students say, I had the right answer on my test, I just switched it to the wrong answer. Or, oh, I was thinking this when I should have been thinking that. And so they're actually learning from those mistakes. So if they were to see that material again on a test or an assignment, they won't get it wrong because they've learned from their mistakes. These are all examples of active learning. Very important, very helpful. Okay, so what does it look like to be an active learning? Right. Well, an active learner, like I said, acts. And so most active learners will use more than one way to learn material. So it doesn't have to be like 5 things. It could be 2 things, right? It could be 3 things. The important thing is your brain will be able to assimilate and retain that information, all right? The more diverse and multiple varied ways of learning material, because everyone is different in their learning style. This I understand, but it's important that you try a couple different methods to take that information or that material that you're trying to learn, right, into your memory for long-term memory, what we call encoding, right? And so a variety of ways will help with that. A lot of active learners are going to be self-motivated. Now, in school, a lot of folks will use their actual grade to motivate them, right? And that's very helpful. And also, some students just want to have information and knowledge, right, so they can be more successful in whatever field of study that they go into. A lot of active learners have this sense of urgency. I worked with several when I was during my educational career, when I was a student, and also as a teacher, that they have this sense of urgency, that every minute counts. And so they have to immediately get to assignments that are due, studying for a test, right? And they don't put it off. And that's a very important aspect, because procrastination can kill people's grades. It can harm, all right, their progress here. So the laid back approach might not necessarily be a good approach, because procrastination is never a good thing. It might get some people through certain levels of education, but when you get to the more advanced and graduate level of education, it's not going to be enough. So a good sense of urgency to make sure that you're taking advantage of every minute that you have is crucial. It's very important. Okay. So an active learner will display some of the following here. All right, we call those active study habits. They'll ask questions in class. I love it. I tell my students all the time, please ask me questions. I tell my patients all the time, ask me questions. I want you to understand, all right, what's going on. And when you don't understand what's going on, ask a question, right? Take those notes, however you prefer to take those notes, either through audio video recording or writing them down, right? Preferably, the best way, one of the best ways to handwrite notes. Not saying there's anything wrong with typing them, but that again is another way of encoding information into your brain for long-term retrieval when you need it there. Right? If you're having difficulty with things, don't just put it off. Don't just stay silent. Ask for help. There's nothing wrong with asking for help, especially if it's for certain concepts that you don't quite understand. Ask the teacher. And especially if we're working on assignments in class, right, make sure that you're utilizing that time. I know it's sometimes tough to stay on task, especially when you're working in a group setting, right? It's easy to talk about what's happening in the news or what's going on with TikTok or YouTube or anything in social media. But keep in mind, active learners like to stay focused. And when they do, it shows. It shows in their work. It shows in how they understand and retain knowledge there. If you happen to not be able to make it to class, I encourage students always to find out what they missed in class. You can contact your professor, but one of the best ways to actually get detailed information is to talk to your classmates. Hey, so-and-so, I wasn't in class on Monday. What did I miss? What did we talk about? Can you help me out? Because sometimes it will take the instructor a little bit longer to get back to the students, right? And so remember, time, urgency, very important. And so you don't want to waste any of that time. And then finally, make sure, right, if there is any homework or assignments that are due, right, that you are taking the time to turn those assignments in on time and that it's good work. And when I say good work, not just something that you scribble down, all right, 10 minutes, 15 minutes before the due dates, right? That's not going to help you. And really, it's just a waste of your time. And you have to ask yourself, what is my time worth? All right. So some of the advantages that we see of active learning, all right, you have, like I said, passive and active learners. Passive learners are just going to hear things and observe, and they kind of like that fly on the wall. They just kind of sit there, all right, and they just observe what's going on in lecture or lab or whatever class that you're taking, whereas active learners are going to participate. And when this happens, that active learning material that is being presented, all right, active learners will actually be able to understand it more, and they'll understand it with less effort, which is always good, and it takes less time. So again, going back to that time aspect, what is your time worth? A lot of students, at least in my circles, some of them work full-time jobs. Some of them are parents in a family and have children to take care of. And in some cases, those folks are actually full-time students. That's a lot to balance. So time is never on your side in scenarios like that. So active learners, right, are going to take advantage of that learning style. And so they can learn more material in less time and then still be able to spend time with loved ones and whatnot. And see, your professors see this. Professors know who are active learners and who are passive learners. And so one of the things that you'll see is, especially in my situation, I love to see active learning in my class, and yes, it ultimately does help me respect my students more. I always respect my students, but I enjoy to see active learning in action, because those students, all right, actually start to feel empowered, and they actually start to hopefully enjoy the material that they're learning. And when you enjoy that learning, you're taking control of that learning, and you're feeling better about yourself, and you're building self-esteem and self-confidence, right? I'm not saying you go to college or you go to graduate school or you go to junior college to build up your self-esteem, right? That's not the main purpose there, right? But it's one of the nice attributes of going to school to gain that self-esteem and that self-confidence there, because it's like Deion Sanders said, all right, if you look good, you play good. And if you play good, you get paid good. So what does that mean? If you are feeling good about yourself, right, whether or not, however you perceive yourself, if you start to feel good, you're going to perform better. And when you perform better, good things are going to come your way. And this is helpful too, especially for students when something comes up, if they can't make the class. I see it all the time. Sickness, illness, passing of a loved one, right? Some sort of scenario occurs. And so a lot of the times, all right, if you see that those students are hardworking students and you know, right, that they're trying their hardest and something does come up and they can't attend class or they have to miss a test, that teacher is going to be more sympathetic and more understanding and will try to work with that student. Not to say that they won't work with that student if something horrible comes up, but it's easier for that professor. And it's always better that way, all right, for the student when you have the sympathy and the respect of your professor here. So like I was saying before, as an active learner, you're empowered. You are taking control. And when you take control of your learning, right, you are going to perform better. And when you perform better, you're going to learn more. And, you know, a lot of times, and you don't really see it, and I didn't see it when I was a student in college, that learning things and gaining that knowledge, you know, a lot of times you're like, well, I just want to learn it so I can do well on the test, so I can get good grades. But I'm going to tell you something, right? Especially as you move through your academic career, right? When you gain that knowledge and you can use that knowledge for whatever profession that you're going to enter into, it's going to help you. It's going to help others. It's going to make you feel better, and you can help others feel better. And that is very, very important when we're talking about that active learner there, right? One of the places that you definitely can find, all right, some comfort is a place that you enjoy studying in. And those places vary from student to student. So you have to find a place, right? I had a cousin who could study in the middle of a busy cafeteria, right? And reading a textbook. That might not work for you, right? Some folks like a nice quiet place. I have studied in cars before just because they were quiet and comfortable for me. So it really depends on, all right, what suits your learning style. So the big thing is find a study place with very little distractions, right? And make sure that you can learn, all right, the material that you need to and the time that's presented for you. So your environment plays a big role, a huge role in that situation. So you've heard me talk about active learning. You have a pretty decent idea of what active learning looks like. How about passive learning? Here's what passive learning looks like. It's the do nothing while learning, pretty much in the hopes of learning material through osmosis. I had a good friend of mine in college who literally used to go to sleep at night and put their textbook underneath their pillow. And they used to say that they were hoping to learn some of that material from that textbook, that it would move from that textbook into their brain through osmosis. Now, they could have been joking around, but basically, when we're talking about passive learning, folks try to learn, right, with very little or no conscious effort. So some of the examples here of passive learning look like this. Daydreaming happens all the time. I was a victim of daydreaming quite often, so I understand. So the point being is stay on task. These types of learners do not take any notes in class or after class. They do not turn in assignments, all right? They do not ask for help, right? They cram the night before. They often skip class. They repeat the same mistakes. I've seen it many, many times on exams, on assignments there, and they just sit there and do not participate in class. So you have to ask yourself, do I exhibit some of these? And I understand that people's learning styles are different, right? And I understand that some folks are more introverted and some are more extroverted, and so they might not want to. But understand this. If you are showing tendencies of passive learning, you're significantly decreasing your success rate. And so you have to ask yourself again, why am I doing this? Is this worth it? And so do I need to change some things up, all right, from passive learning to active learning? And I hope the answer to that is yes, right? So these students here, right, when they're engaging in passive learning, are just going to sit there, all right, and wait maybe for the last minute to ask help. And I am consciously, and I will always try to get these students to come forward right, sooner rather than later when they need that help. So don't wait, okay, to ask for help. Make sure when you start to feel overwhelmed that you engage with your professor to get that help, that you ask maybe some of your classmates for help, maybe form study groups, right? I always tell these students, don't wait until your grade starts to plummet into the D, F range, right? When that happens, it's tough. It's really, really difficult, right, to claw your way back from that. All my students in my classes always start with an A. They always do. And I tell them at this point, it's up to you whether you keep that A. And so the more work that you put in and that active learning, the more likely you are to keep that A. So don't just sit on your hands and not do anything. Take action. Take action. These passive learners, you'll see, will always ask for what we call that easy extra credit, because a lot of times they didn't do the assignments before, all right, when they were due, or they didn't study enough, or they weren't engaging enough in active learning styles to really learn that information there. And this could go on for weeks and months. And then these students will ask for some extra credit. And I tell them, you should not need the extra credit if you actually took the time to work on the assigned credit tasks that made your grade, that make it to the point where you are going to be a successful student, all right, by not engaging in passive learning, but really engaging in the active learning. So this is what you'll see with some passive learners here, all right? A lot of times, all right, these students will sit in class. They won't ask questions. When I was in school, I was that student, especially in graduate school, that always asked the questions. And a student would come up to me after class in most cases and say, I'm really glad that you asked that question because I had the same question. And I would scratch my head and say, well, why didn't you ask that question then? Why did you wait for me? They were the passive student or learner, and I was the active learner. And so don't wait for others. Raise your hand. All right. Ask the professor to repeat that, or ask a question on what was being taught. Right. These notes that you take in class are important, or when you're out of class, when you're studying. But don't just take the notes and put them away somewhere, right? Look over those notes. Peruse that information. You made those notes. Take the time to study them. It is important. And I don't want you, when you're learning this material here, to think I just have to learn this material for a grade. You do and you don't, all right? Yes, it does reflect, for the grade there, your understanding of the material. But at the same time, especially, I can't speak for everybody, but for my classes, I am preparing you for something better and for something bigger, whatever your profession is going to be. And I want to make sure that you have a great foundation. And you too should want to make sure, all right, that you have a great foundation here. All right. And so a couple other things that you might want to look at when you're displaying passive learner, all right, attributes, right, is if you miss class, if a student misses class, right, and they complain about material that's on a test, right, that wasn't presented to them during one of the days that they were in class, that's another passive learning, all right, attribute. And folks, I'll tell you what, it's not going to get that student very far. So if a student misses class, they're still responsible for that material, right? And so that is more important for them to really focus, all right, when they miss class, to get with somebody or to ask the teacher what was missed in class there. Then another passive learner attribute is homework or assignments, right? Most teachers can pretty much tell when very minimal effort was put into an assignment, all right, that a teacher gave the students there. Right? In some of my classes, I've asked people to do concept maps, and that there's only 5 items on a concept map and it's hand drawn and it looks like it was put together 5 minutes before the due date, teachers can tell that. And that is going to, again, reflect onto that student there as to what learning style that they're really currently engaging in. So they have to ask themselves again, is this worth my time? And they should say, yes, this is worth my time, so I should put the effort into that. So is there any benefit to being a passive learner? Nope, there isn't. I'll tell you right now, there is not. Right? Some people can get by a little bit, but there is no benefit to being a passive learner, right? And a lot of these students, all right, may have, all right, that appearance of kind of being disgruntled or whining about certain things because, right, they may be struggling in the class. And I should say, I don't want anyone to struggle in the class. I know some folks take material in a little bit easier than others, right? We all learn on different levels here, all right? And so I've always been that person. I tell folks all the time, I'm the smartest dumb guy I know. I had to work very hard to get the grades that I got. And some people said, well, you make it look so easy. Yeah, that's because you don't see what I'm doing behind the curtain. You don't see what I was doing when I was studying by myself and all the effort that I put in, right? So I tell the same to my students, right? Active learning is the way to go. So where can you get some help? Look around, all right? From people, teachers, tutors, all right, friends and family, people that know this type of material here can help you, right? Always talk to counselors, right, in regards to, hey, what is my best learning style, right? And places where you can get help, right? Tutoring centers, computer labs, library. Let's not forget the internet, folks. All right, I'm not saying to believe everything that you read on the internet, but the internet can help you. It's a wonderful resource as long as you go to, all right, sites that are valid sites that will give you information there. Sometimes instead of emailing your teacher a question about something and waiting for the response because they might not get back to you soon enough, maybe go on the internet and look and see, or go into your textbook or use one of the resources that have been assigned to your class. You might find the answer there. And so when you do that, you're like, hey, this isn't so bad. I can actually learn some of this material pretty easily. So finally, coming down to passive and active learning here, all right, active learning will help you to learn that material, all right, that much quicker, that much easier. So how do I learn things easier? What can help me to do that, all right? Well, one, try to be as healthy as possible, all right? Being healthy, all right, having that homeostasis there will affect your ability to learn. Try it sometime when you're sick with the flu and when you're feeling amazing. Try studying material. It's always easier to study material when you're feeling better, okay? Keep your stress levels low, right? When you're tired, it's easy, all right, especially in this day and age when folks are working, all right, managing families and going to school here, to get stressed out, to get tired. And so you want to make sure, all right, that you're getting enough rest, okay? You want to try to get at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. An Olympic athlete requires 8. Some people vary, right? But, right, the more sleep you get, right, or enough sleep, if you get enough sleep, learning becomes that much easier. Eating well, there's a saying, garbage in equals garbage out. Putting garbage into your body, okay, your productivity will not be at its maximum. So eat well. I'm not saying go on an all organic diet, right? We're all adults here. We all know pretty much what is good to eat and what is not so good to eat, all right? Less processed food, more natural food. Exercise. I'm not saying jump on the treadmill or swim laps in the pool, but at least go out for a walk, right? Walking's free. Everybody that's able-bodied, all right, can walk. And I always encourage them to walk. And then the final two, no drinking, no smoking. Right? Everything in moderation. I always encourage folks not to smoke, right? Long-term smoking effects. It's documented, well documented, the adverse health effects that go on with that. As to the aspect of no drinking, right? I would say always everything in moderation, okay? But folks that have a tendency to drink too much, obviously we know that that can cause issues there. Well, folks, I hope you learned something from this, and I hope you can take something away from this short video seminar here to make you successful in your academic career. And I hope that you've learned something today. Folks, you have a great day. Enjoy everything in life. And remember, you only have today, okay, to make a better tomorrow. Enjoy the day.